Alright, so I'm going to do a commentary for a 26 Black Rook Cold from Fort Week, from last Fort Week. I believe it was Fort Spiteful Volcanic. I'll call it again once the actual key gets put in. I'm running Crit Rune, as well as just normal food, and then I'm running Verse Flask, and then here are my talents. So for this instance, you don't really need Spell Steal, but it's the easiest way for me to get down to Mirror Images, because I don't want to spend 2 points in Tempest Barrier. Other than that, I'm just running the typical Ice Cold talent. I am running Ring of Frost. I wanted to play around with Ring of Frost a little bit for the bats in this instance, as well as for the cat, the cat that jumps in the little trash before the second boss. So I kind of wanted to test out with this. I don't know if I actually use it at all to test it out, but it's something that I kind of wanted to play around with. And then I'm doing it a little bit just because it is Spiteful Week. I decided to run Frostbite instead of Ray of Frost. Otherwise, you would basically always run Ray of Frost in keys, especially on Tyrannical weeks. But I am running Frostbite. You would typically, if you are running Frostbite, you could also run Sub-Zero to benefit on the AoE a little bit more. But I decided to run Splintering Cold just because the bosses are a little bit challenging in this key. And they do take a little while. And some of the Prowl mobs are like unfreezable, so you don't really get the benefit from Sub-Zero for those. It's just a little bit more AoE pad. So I decided to go with Frostbite and Splintering Cold, and then everything else is just the basic tree. I do run Ice Flows instead of Blink, or instead of Shimmer. That's just a personal choice. It doesn't really matter for this key. But yeah, we'll get right into it. But I kind of wanted to go Sub-Zero for this key. Yeah, so Fortified Volcanic Spiteful. A little tiny tip: you can Mass Barrier before the key starts because the cooldowns reset, or like 2-minute cooldowns, or something. I don't know exactly what the number is, but if you Mass Barrier, it lasts through the start of the key, so everybody has the extra barrier, and then you still have your cooldown. So this first pull, you basically want someone to interrupt this counselor to bring it in. Unfortunately, the counselor is mad slow. I'm not sure why. I think it's like a DH low. And this is obviously a Lust pull, so typical AoE opener. You can precast Blizzard into, which I don't think I actually did. I canceled it because I interrupted the counselor. But you would do precast Blizzard into Orb, Icy Veins, Lust, Comet Storm, Cone of Cold, Orb, Comet Storm again, and then I'm using Balefire. I use Balefire typically before I Cone of Cold, or after I Cone of Cold, because that's when the first Comet Storm is landing. There's kind of a little bit of play around you can with that, but you need to be very aware, especially on Fort Weeks, of these Soul Blast. If you get anything more than one of them, you're just gonna die. I also have a Soul Blade on me. Yeah, you saw I just got obliterated. I think, yeah, we already have 3 deaths to people just getting Soul Blasted, make that 4. So it's very important for you to get AoE stops for the Soul Blasts. Otherwise, your group is just going to get shredded. So I have another Soul Blade. I should be using Ice Cold here, just because I know there's still Soul Blasts and other Soul Blades going off, but I'm guessing I don't, which is a little greedy. Send your defensives here. You don't really need them for anything else. The next pack is obviously a little challenging with the Glaive. But other than that, that's it. Yeah, you see I literally just got one shot by a Soul Blast. So use your defensives pretty liberally in this first pull. You're not going to need them for the boss, and you basically only need a barrier every time you're going to get Glaved in the next boss. Or in the mini boss, I should say. Yeah, be very aware of these 4 keys. You saw I basically just got, yeah, I got one shot. I didn't have mirror images rolling, and I literally got one shot by 2k. And it was literally my full health pool, so I just didn't have, I didn't have images or barrier up at all, so. Now we are shredding to boss. I actually kind of like this. The reason that I think we're doing this is because a lot of the time, right after the boss, oh, he's saying it right now, but after the boss you can go back because the RP takes like 30 seconds, so you can pull the pack while the RP is happening. So it's kind of a little bit of a time save. Now, since I'm not running Ray of Frost, I typically use my my Balefire in single target right after I launch a Glacial Spike. I Fat Fingered Cone of Cold, don't worry about that. But if you're not running Ray of Frost, I would just use it after you use a Glacial Spike. a Glacial Spike because your damage is calculated on hit, so you'll save a little bit of time if you use it after the Glacial Spike's already in the air. Otherwise, just basic single target. This is part of the reason why I do like Ice Flows. If I mean, there's some niche things I could obviously just shimmer away, but you can ice flows and just kind of keep them very close to the boss. Sorry, very close to each other. I also didn't know that you couldn't run behind those, which is unfortunate, but... And if you can, you want to be shattering your Comet Storms in single target with your Winter's Chill. And now we said that we're going to CC one of these. So I am running Ring of Frost. This is another thing I wanted to test out. These mobs are actually immune. I'm not sure if it's immune because it was outside of the wall or if because they're actually immune. Because I know you can like Druid Root and stuff. But we did say we were going to CC one, so I Frost Nova'd that one to see if I could stop it. And then I Frost Nova'd these just to kind of keep them slowed a little bit. It doesn't look like we're actually going to be able to... We don't have any CC left to CC one. I Blast Wave. This is another reason that Blast Wave slow is kind of nice. If you need to do something like that. But you see, you get a lot of uptime if you are... if you are CCing one of these mobs away. But do be aware when he does do his, I think, like Soul Blast or whatever it's called. Now, I decided to save Balefire here, I'm pretty sure, because I know the next pack is going to be a... It's the hard 4 pack, so I'm saving Balefire. And now this is when Soul Blast is coming out. So typically when Soul Blast comes out, I didn't do it right now, which you see is why I die. You should be using Mass Barrier and like mirror images for it. So this was very bad on me. I didn't see the cast actually going off because I was not used to the mobs. One of the mobs still being alive or being CC'd for it. So yeah. This, I will say in advance, this key was like an atrocity. I think we had like 24 deaths and still timed it. So, yeah. No, I could have just released because the release happens right here anyways, but... And now we're going to do, it looks like we're going to do the left side mob. I think the left side mob has a kick instead of the Brutal Glaive, or whatever it's called, which the Brutal Glaive on a high enough key, yeah, it's Spirit Blessed. The Glaive on a high enough key can probably just one-shot you, which is my assumption on why we're going this way, so. And now again, typical AoE opener, you do the AoE opener anything more than 3 targets just because the value you get from Cone of Cold. So it's Precast Blizzard, into Orb, Comet Storm, Cone of Cold, and then I used my Balefire, and then Orb, Comet Storm again. Now see, I'd have damage meters up if, you know, I wasn't in, if I didn't wanted to see how much I died. Yeah, so you saw our Monk just got one-shot by one of the Soul Blasts, which is not ideal. Now, it's a little unfortunate, especially running Frostbite, you need to be very aware, and you should probably let your group know in advance, because if you're running Frostbite, none of your groups, you can't rely on your group's like AoE knocks to actually interrupt the casts. So like Blast Wave would be stopped sometimes by Frostbite, so you just got to be very aware of that when Frostbite is up and not. I probably should be popping Icy Veins again, but I don't, I believe. Because there's a decent amount of time. I use Cone of Cold here. I know there's going to be 45 seconds in between here and the next pack. The next pack is going to be the spiders and the stairs. And otherwise, if it's just in 2 targets, so I'm still considering 2 target as the Spitefuls being up. You want to be using your instant cast Blizzards, but you don't want to hard cast until 3 targets if you're running M+ talents. So Now this pack is a little. This is dangerous for the tank just because of the. I want to say it's a disease that goes on then. I'm not entirely sure. I don't entirely like this pack as Frost Mage because we obviously need mobs to be stationary running up. And you typically run up to you either run all the way up the stairs or you run up to the big spider. And it looks like we're gonna run up to the big spider, so I can't really do any damage until we stop right here. So I pop mirror images because I'm knowing I'm gonna be probably getting a lot of threat here because I'm gonna be using my AoE combo again, going into, like I said, Blizzard, precast Blizzard, into Orb, into Comet Storm, and then I did use my personal lust here. I probably shouldn't have, or I should have used it earlier because we need lust for on fortified weeks. You most likely want to lust one of the packs before second boss, not the 3-pack right beforehand, which I'll go into. But I didn't have it for I don't believe I ended up having it. And then you saw I tried facing my orbs backwards because I know all the spiders are going to be coming up. These next ones, I believe I'm sending my orb into the wall, or try to, because I know that these mobs are going to be stationary here. But this area right here is probably the worst area in Black Rook Hold, in my opinion, the hardest one. This entire room. The Arcanists are obviously very punishing if you don't get kicks or interrupts on them. It's basically like an immediate, you just will die. You get one shot, and then you obviously have all the archers that are just randomly shooting all the time, and they're just picking people. I think they do, like, if I remember correctly, I'm sure I'll see it because I know I die a few times to it. They do around like 500k damage a shoot, so it's they're very punishing. Now I am basically single targeting the prio mob here. I could be using like my Frost Novas and stuff to shatter them. I do it after I have the flurries on it, but if I don't have flurries on it, I just worry about prioing the single target mob with my Glacial Spike flurries. Otherwise, you can use like Glacial Spike Ice Nova, Glacial Spike Frost Nova. Obviously, Frost Nova is going to be like your last pick because it really does like no damage whatsoever. But yeah. This is the next area that I wanted to attempt to play with Ring of Frost. I shouldn't have Ring of Frosted here because the mob actually isn't here yet. There's a pat that runs back and forth that has a little cat in it, and the cat jumps on people. So I kind of wanted to see. I wanted to wait to see if the Mega Frost works. So you see the pat is walking back right now. And now I didn't use my Balefire, which I should have used my Balefire here because I did my Cone of Cold combo. My assumption is since I just used the Cone of Cold combo, I'm waiting because I know that I used Icy Veins on this pack, so I wanted to make sure I had something for the next pack because the next pack is obviously another hard pack. So my assumption is I didn't use Balefire here, and I'm going to use Balefire in the next pack with the next Cone of Cold combo. So this is the cat that I was talking about that jumps on people. You see that it's kind of trucking me. I did alter time knowing that the cat was going to jump. I have the cooldown timings above, which I believe are from DBM, but I could be mistaken with that. And now I should be priming my Glacial Spike. I definitely am. I'm losing a lot of value from a lot of my icicles. So you saw like even 2 of my last 3 GCDs were not setting my Glacial Spike. So I'm just overcapping on icicles a lot. So now I do it. So now I go into my Glacial Spike into my Ice Nova. I don't have any flurries or anything on targets, and there's really no unfreezable mobs in this. So in AoE, you always want to be shattering your Glacial Spike with. You have 3 different like AoE freezes. It's your pet freeze. So you have your pet freeze when you're in Icy Veins, and that's my ability right here. I don't actually use this on its own often. I have it macroed into my Blizzard, which is definitely a loss in terms of damage. I would not recommend doing that. You want to be using it specifically for shattering your Glacial Spikes, but I very much forgot to use it all of the time. I'm not used to having the pet freeze. So I just bound it to Blizzard, and I get some value from it regardless, but it's obviously losing a lot of value if I run out of shatters from my Glacial Spike. I should be using my my Iridol as well here. And now in these packs, especially on 4 weeks, you need to be interrupting Knife Dance. That's the one that does AoE, Pulse AoE. So yeah, so I just called. I'm assuming that we were either going to use Lust on this pack or the next pack afterwards. Unfortunately, since I used Lust so late on, and when there was only 3 minutes left on Temporal Warp, or on Exhaustion or whatever, I didn't actually have it. So I think we actually do full wipe here and come back, which means I did end up having Lust. But now in these packs, I typically wanted to target. Yeah, so I just got hit by 2 shoots at once. I had barrier rolling and I believe some other defensive, and I basically got one shot. I should not have G-invised unless I knew I had another shoot coming after me. I just did it for the DR in this case, but now we have like Arcanus dead, so now there's going to be no more cast going on, and I just need to be aware of the shoots. I think as these keys get higher and higher, I think I start doing it on this key itself. Is you should be LOSing these shoots on higher keys. So since I know that I'm actually going to be getting shot from this target because I have target of target, I alter time. Unfortunately, I'm actually getting shot by both of them at once, so I believe I tried gaming it, and I alter timed and then immediately died. I had a 0.1 second window in order to get the window correct, which I obviously did not get correct. But I don't have anything that tracks that. If you have like Plater or something like that, you should be able to see who they're targeting. I only have target of target with my frames, so there's definitely something that I could look into if it keeps happening. I know I've had that issue before, so that's one reason why I would not really recommend my UI, because it's definitely missing crucial information for keys like this. Because if I did, know 2 people were targeting me, I could have like ice colded and had the DR from it, or I could have LOS'd, or so now this is the pack that I typically want to Lust, which again I still don't have Lust, which is unfortunate, but the tank dies, and now we're gonna die now. Well, we didn't actually die. We had enough CCs, which is astounding. But now that I have Lust coming up here, I'm gonna Lust when we get back, which I should have had Lust going into this. Because this is one of the worst pulls. It has double Archer, and then the mob that puts a Dispel on people, I believe, and 2 knife dances. So you want to be really careful with this pull. And now since we're all here and this is a fortified week, this is where you're going to want to be sending Lust. So I decided to send Lust here, or very soon I decided to send Lust. Yeah. And now the other things that you can interrupt in these packs, you can, like Dragon's Breath the shoots and stuff, but I wouldn't recommend. I'd recommend saving your AoE stops for Knife Dance, which is that one that just happened there, as well as the arrow barrages. So you saw I used Dragon's Breath to interrupt the arrow barrage of the archer that was on the stairs. But you see, even with barrier rolling, a shoot by itself took me from... I was at full HP with the barrier, it took me down to 50% health. So they were hitting me for around like 500k. Obviously, that pull was entirely scuffed. Didn't have Lust going into it. Our tank died. It was basically like a full reset, and we ended up keeping the pull alive, which was obviously good, keeping the pull alive. You might get a little bit more deaths, but it saves the pull timer of the damage you already did. So, like I was saying, I think you need to LOS the shoots that happen. So, I'm not entirely sure if you can on this. I wanted to try and LOS around this structure right here, but I'm not positive if it's actually LOS right here. Otherwise, you can just go in the room that you were coming in. I'll go back. Otherwise, you can just LOS like around this wall, so you pull a pack here, and then you can just keep LOSing here when you're getting shot at. Because these, like I said, the shoots are very deadly on fort keys, on higher fort keys. Now, I did use my second list here, because I know that I just need to get it on cooldown as immediately as I can. And now I'm using the AoE shatters. So I should have actually, in this case, instead of Glacial Spike Flaring, unless I was targeting the main target, I should have Glacial Spiked and Ice Nova'd, because if it hits both archers, both of them can be frozen. So like now, I had Flurry already on the target, so I had my Winter's Chill already. and then I went into a Glacial Spike and Ice Nova. So this is the case where if you have 2 Winter's Chills already on the target, you can Glacial Spike Ice Nova. That does use both Winter's Chill stacks, but your Ice Nova will use the first, and it'll freeze all mobs around the one you're targeting. There'll still be 1 Winter's Chill left, and then your Glacial Spike will hit. So it'll still be able to shatter on the main target with that Winter's Chill, even if it's a non-freezable enemy. So let's say I had that on this enemy right here, which is non-freezable. Then I would still actually get the AoE shatter bonus from Glacial Spike, as long as it still has Winter's Chill on it. But that only works if you have a Winter's Chill on it when you're using the Ice Nova. So in the case of having 2 Winter's Chills, you can, when you finish your Glacial Spike, you can Glacial Spike Ice Nova. If there were to be only 1 Winter's Chill on the target and you wanted to use those AoE shatters, you would have to Glacial Spike into Frost Nova, because Frost Nova doesn't consume Winter's Chill stacks. Or you could Glacial Spike into your Pet Freeze. Now, I'm definitely overcapping on Ice Goes a lot. It's a very common occurrence of mine. Very bad habit. You should basically be You should 100% be setting your Glacial Spike as soon as you get 5 Icicles. Otherwise, you're wasting Glacial Spikes throughout a key. Now, this boss absolutely just ruined me. So the way that this boss works is all the mechanics, the Brutal Glaives and the I-Beams, they prio range players over melee. So you can kind of bait it in a sense by being in melee. In this case, I never did that, and I just stayed in range, which means that I got every single mechanic possible on this boss. So if this boss was me just fighting for my life the entire boss fight. Luckily, it was a fortified key. If it was a tyrannical, I'm pretty sure I'd just die, and I definitely cannot survive. But because I have defensives rolling, I decided not to use Alter Time. I had a barrier ready, and then I used Mass Barrier. The only thing is that this is the only thing that needs to be healed in this entire fight, so the Mistweaver has nothing else to heal other than these Dark Rushes that happen. Other than that, the only thing that's going to be happening is the Brutal Glaive. So this one, I was already low health and I didn't have any defensives rolling. I didn't have Mirror Image or anything else. So I decided to Ice Cold because I wasn't full health, so that it'll give me both the DR and the heal. Do you want to Ice Nova after Geos and never Comet Storm? Comet Storm is used after Flurries, or it's used in your Shatter combo. Now, there is a certain strat for this I-Beam. I'm pretty sure I do end up doing it. It's not yeah, so I do end up doing it here. It's not ideal because you do lose DPS, especially if you don't have any Ice Flows. But you can just be jumping up and down, and you won't actually take any takes from the I-Beam. Unfortunately, in this case, because I'm the only ranged, I'm going to be losing a lot of uptime, so I'm just sending unbuffed Ice Lances, which is very bad. I should just be like blinking. I should just be like moving one way, letting it come to me, cast, and then I should like blink back and basically just do like a straight line back and forth. Now I decided not to use Icy Veins here, so I should do what I'm doing right here. Obviously, it'd be better if I'd be able to run back to the other side now, because now I'm literally just sending unbuffed Ice Lances, which is obviously better than nothing, but it's quite a DPS loss to actually just be doing the jumping up and down. Obviously, it makes the room very clear, but you don't really need to worry too much about the room. You're never going to run out of space. And now, for most of the Brutal Glaives that I do have Alter Time, I Alter Time when I'm at full health before the Glaive hits, and then I Alter Time immediately back. I could wait until the first tick of Brutal Glaive happens, but there's a very high chance that it actually just one-shots you. It looks like, from what I just saw there, I went from 93% to 69% health, so it actually hit me for 24% of my health. Sometimes I try and game it a little bit. Most of the time, it's not very beneficial to do that, but yeah. I just like doing the Alter Time right at the beginning. Now again here, I saw I was low health. Unfortunately, I did combo my Ice Cold and my... and I got Cocoon at the same time. So that's not great. Because now I'm not going to have a defensive. I do end up dying on this fight. So that's not going to be good. Because we stacked basically our two big cooldowns. If I just had Life Cocoon or just had Ice Cold, I would have been perfectly fine. But since I used both of them, I'm now going to be dry on a future one. So now you saw me waiting here. I'm now just in perma danger. And I have Dark Rush. The Dark Rush does damage itself, especially when you have a Brutal Glaive. If you're getting Brutal Glaive and Dark Rush at the same time, you want to make sure you're using a defensive. So this is where I end up using G-Invis. I wasn't G-Invising the Brutal Glaive because it would retarget, and I wasn't sure who it was going to target. I could have, but now since I actually didn't use the defensive here, but I'm getting trucked here, and now I have Brutal Glaive, and I Alter Timed. Fortunately got me back to full health. I want to see when I G-Invised. Okay, so I G-Invised after the Brutal Glaive, which actually, if you G-Invis after something is already casted, you don't get the DR from it, so you need to G-Invis prior. So all I was doing was basically G-Invising the dot. So as you see here, I'm at 66% health. I believe I barriered, and the barrier saved me some. Or I got healed by the Mistweaver, and then I G-Invised. The G-Invis actually didn't use any of the DR because the Glaive was already in the air. So if you are using like G-Invis or Ice Cold for the DR purposes, you need to make sure you're doing it prior to the cast finishing. And now, like I said, I Alter Timed there, back to 100% health. The Mistweaver topped me back up before that Brutal Glaive came out. But now I'm basically dry here on all defensives. The only thing I have left is actually my health pot is on cooldown, so I have nothing left at this point. I just have a barrier. And obviously, I'm using my barrier on my current Brutal Glaive. And at this point, I just know I'm dead. Because I have no other defensives, I have nothing else that I can do. At that point, what I should have done is I should have ran into melee and hoped that it baits on somebody else. Otherwise, I'm just dead. as you saw there. But if you are the only range in your group, you just need to cycle your defensives, and the healer needs to know that you're just going to be getting milked the entire time. This is a pull where Frostbite is good. Now, if I had lusted immediately and been using Shifting Power properly, I would be having Lust again right now. But again, your typical AoE combo, you start, I precasted Blizzard, or I believe I precasted Blizzard, into Orb, Comet, and then Comet Storm, Cone of Cold, Balefire, Orb, Comet Storm, Blizzard, Shifting Power. And that should be your typical combo in AoE, every single time. Now, I did make sure I had Flurry on my main target, for when I was shattering my Glacial Spike, which is right here, and then I should have just used Ice Nova, because I did have Ice Nova still. I ended up using Frost Nova, just so I didn't use a Winter's Chill stack, but it wasn't needed because I had 2 Winter's Chills on the target. So like I said, if you have 2, you can use Glacial Spike Ice Nova. If you have 1, and it's on a mob that you want to be, that is unfreezable, just use the Glacial Spike Frost Nova, because then it won't use a Winter's Chill stack. And now here, I didn't have Ice Nova when I was casting it originally, so I went into Glacial Spike into a Frost Nova cast. Now our tank died on this pull, but now we can just kite them with, good old Frost Mage Frostbite shenanigans. Now I probably shouldn't be spending a Glacial Spike here. The mobs are going to be frozen, so I should kind of just leave that. But now here again is going to be another AoE pull. I have all my cooldowns. I don't have Balefire up though, so I just opened it without Balefire. I do have Lust though, so obviously this is going to be a pull with Lust, but no Icy Veins. I believe I actually saved my combo because I see Balefire is just about to come off cooldown. So again, I precasted a Blizzard. Orb. Now I do have this, and if you had Icy Veins instead of Time Warp or your Lust, it would be Icy Veins here, but I only have Lust. So I go into a Lust, into Comet Storm, and I'm waiting for my Balefire to come off cooldown. which I probably shouldn't have done because I lose value. And then as soon as my Balefire comes off cooldown, I Cone of Cold into the Balefire. Now, what I could have done, I could have waited a half second longer because obviously I'm getting a bunch of CDR in my orb right now. So you see my orb is literally already 3/4 back. I could have waited basically another like half second. And I could have gotten another free orb. But otherwise, it's still the same AoE combo. Now, these mobs are unfreezable as well. So if I am going to be freezing them, I want to make sure that I either have 2 Winter's Chill stacks on them or 1 Winter's Chill stack, and then I use my I'll use the Glacial Spike Frost Nova instead of the Glacial Spike Ice Nova in order to shatter on them. And then you should be using your Comet Storm. Even if you're not shattering it with your Cone of Cold, you should be using... There is one Comet Storm that's not going to be shattered. Which was that one. You'll have your first 2 of the fight will always be shattered. The one in the middle won't be, and then your next 2 always will be. So it's obviously 2 out of every 3 are going to be shattered. And now, obviously, even though our tank died, we still had... As a Frost Mage, obviously these mobs are very slowed, and they're going to be frozen all the time by Frostbite, which is very obviously beneficial for kiting, especially when your tank's dead. So, do you prio GS or Blizzard? GS is always priority, even in AoE, as long as you can shatter it. And it's obviously prio in single target as well, but... Shattering GS and AoE is your top priority, and then followed by everything else. Your Orb, your Blizzard, your Comet Storm, your Shifting Power. Not in that order. I don't remember the exact order. I believe it's Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm is the order. Now again, typical AoE opener. I'm going to keep going over this every single time because it's the AoE opener you should be doing. I precasted a Blizzard, Orb, Icy Veins, Comet Storm, Cone of Cold, Balefire, Orb, Comet Storm, Blizzard, Shifting Power, which I didn't actually use Shifting Power here, which I should have. I think I was saving Shifting Power because I knew the Dominator was going to be using the Fell Frenzy, so I wanted to save my interrupt for it. But now I can Orb. And I should be shifting powering here, so I'm not actually using good prio here. I should be shifting powering to get that immediately on cooldown and get my other things back off cooldown. And I'll be very careful with what I just did. I ran ahead, which means I basically get the aggro of those bats as soon as possible. Now what I should have been doing is I should have been using Ring of Frost here to try and to test out to see if the bats can actually run through Ring of Frost, which I'm pretty sure they can't. But if you do have the Fell Frenzy, you want to be aware. So our tank actually died here. So I'm pretty sure we ended up wiping here. A full wipe. As I said, this key was an absolute disaster in terms of wiping and deaths, but... Let's GS into Ice Nova if there's 2 procs of Winter's Chill. If there's 2 procs of Winter's Chill, yeah, in AoE, yes, that should be your prayer. Well, Ice Nova comes after Pet Freeze. In terms of AoE shattering, yes. Now again, if I was having this correctly, if I had used my my Lust at the correct times and actually used Shifting Power off cooldown, I would have had Lust for that pack because Lust was off cooldown, but I still have 50 seconds left until Lust is ready. So because I wasn't using Shifting Power or Lust on cooldown, we basically lose a value of a Lust here. Obviously, I am the only Lust here, so that they could have used drums or something like that. But I should be saving, or I should know the timings of Lust and when I'm able to use my own, and when I am able to get an extra one in versus when I'm not. So this is where I use Ring of Frost to try and test on the bats. If I get Pel Frenzy, which I didn't actually get another one while I had this out. And I was asking Lust, I didn't know if we wanted to Lust on this trash, because since we have more than 10 minutes, we technically would be able to get another Lust off. But I believe we're saving Lust so that we have Lust in P1 of the last boss. And now for these mobs, you should basically go all the way to the boss room. And I'm using my Frost Novas and my other freezes in order to try and stop these bats from getting to me. Instead of using it to shatter my GS, just because these bats are very lethal, especially on a fortified week. And now because my Prio mob wasn't... I didn't have Winter's Chill on my Prio mob, instead of using Glacial Spike Flurry, which would have shattered it most likely on one of the bats, I guaranteed a shatter by Glacial Spiking Flurrying on the main target. If I had Glacial Spiked Ice Nova, and let's say like my Glacial Spike accidentally hit, well, not accidentally, it decided to hit the other mob that's not freezable, I wouldn't shatter that Glacial Spike at all in AoE, so instead I used the Glacial Spike Flurry just to make sure that it shattered on the main target. Well, your priority is shattering Glacial Spike in general, so it doesn't matter what you're really shattering it, but with in AoE, you want to be shattering it with more than just on one target. So Flurry has a little bit lower priority unless it's a non-freezable mob, in which case you want Flurry on your main target, and then you want to be using Ice Nova or your other freezes. Unfortunately, because I didn't have the Lusts, I lose a lot of value with my Lust here because I can't Lust until the last boss now, so... I'm losing a lot of value with Lust being on cooldown and not having Temporal Warp or Time Displacement or whatever, or Exhaustion. Now, if you do pull these mobs, Fel Frenzy does actually stack the boss, so you need to make sure that you are interrupting Fel Frenzy. Otherwise, the boss will get the damage amp. And now, Hateful Gaze also only baits on range players. Now, you typically think that you can use G-Invis here in order to use it as a DR for Hateful Gaze. But it actually doesn't work because as soon as he's targeting somebody with Hateful Gaze, you can't use like a meld or anything like that because it will instantly go off. So your only defensive options basically for Hateful Gaze are Barrier, Mirror Image, and then you have your Ice Blocks, your Ice Colds, and then Alter Time. If you use G-Invis, it doesn't actually use the DR for it. And now you can basically Hateful Gaze for it should be every other, or Alter Time for every other one. And if you can, you want to be baiting the I-beams. The I-beams, most of the time, there will be a bat that has like a little line that's going towards you. And now I'm getting a Hateful Gaze here. I believe whether DH runs in front of it instead. I wasn't worrying too much about Alter Timing. It's not too big of a deal, but I wasn't worrying about it because I wasn't getting one shot. And once you get up to a high enough key, I'm sure I don't believe it was one-shotting me on a 25 when I did a 25 this week on Tyrannical, but obviously on a 26 Tyrannical, that's going to one-shot you. So you should have a defensive up every single time. You'll have a barrier every single time Hateful Gaze is happening. It's like 25 seconds apart, which is like basically the exact second of the cooldown. So you saw I Alter Timed there. I did have a barrier rolling. So Alter Time on this Earth Stomp. It brought me to 54% health, and then I just Alter back to full. Now here, if someone's not going to soak it, I see that the tank is soaking it, so I don't use any defensives. People can obviously run in between you and Hateful Gaze. That's how it takes the stack. Most melee will kind of juggle that between the two of you. You have to juggle it between 3 people. The debuff fault is not enough for just 2 people to juggle it. So it has to be 3 people juggling the debuff if you are doing it. And typically they have melee take the Hateful Gaze. I also time this Earth Stomp again. And now I should be using Balefire as soon as it as soon as I use my next Glacial Spike combo, unless I'm saving it for, yeah, I use Balefire, unless I'm saving it for the next pack, but I wouldn't really recommend saving your Balefire or any cooldowns unless the pack's like going to die before you get like value out of it. And because I did take Frostbite, I did lose a little bit of single target, and did not Ray of Frost, but since I'm taking Splintering Cold instead of Sub-Zero, I'm still doing pretty decent single target damage. But yeah. How do you play around raging and not being able to freeze your AoE GS? Just suck it up and play Flurry single target. You can obviously still freeze or shatter your GS with your Flurries, but you can no longer shatter it with your like Ice Nova or Pet Freeze and stuff like that. So in that case, when raging is the affix, you kind of just need to make sure that you always have a Flurry on the target that you're hitting. When raging is the thing. When raging is actually active. Otherwise, when it's not active, or you can obviously get soothes, because soothes will always happen. I would still recommend, if you don't have flurries on your main target, I'd still recommend typically still doing your Glacial Spike Ice Nova and stuff like that, because there's a chance that somebody soothes one of the mobs. But now I am using another set of cooldowns here. I know we still have another ad pack to pull before the boss, so I decided to use another set of Icy Veins. I know this next ad pack, I probably could have waited a little bit. So that I had my Balefire for the start of the next pack, but otherwise I was fine using it there, making sure it's just using it off CD. Now I'm starting this pull with the Glacial Spike Ice Nova. The only reason I started with that, which obviously it has a higher priority, so it should be my start. Typically I would start with the Blizzard Frozen Orb Cold combo, the Blizzard Frozen Orb Common Storm Cold Orb Common Storm. Because you have Glacial Spike going into the pack, you can just start with your Glacial Spike Ice Nova. The only thing that I would be wary if you are doing that is instead of you want to be popping either like G-Invis or Mirror Images, because a Shattered Glacial Spike will give you a lot of aggro at the start of the pull, especially if it's a tank that really doesn't have much aggro on pull. So be very careful if you are starting with the Glacial Spike Shatter. But now that the pull started, now I do my AoE combo. And now I didn't have Ice Nova or my Pet Freeze in this case, so I went into a Glacial Spike Frost Nova, which should be your last case scenario in order to shatter your Glacial Spike in AoE. So I didn't have Ice Nova, so I just used a Frost Nova. The reason is because Frost Nova basically does like 0 AoE damage at all, versus Ice Nova actually does some AoE damage. And then Pet Freeze is something that's it's only available while you have your pet, so you want to be prioring that over your other freezes. So now that I have Ice Nova, I should be Glacial Spiking into Ice Nova here, which I do. And then obviously using Iridos on cooldown. Be very wary of these Shadow Bolts in P1. On this week on Tyrannical, the Shadow Bolts are actually hitting me for like 790k. So basically always have a barrier running in P1 if you can. Typically I like to save Mirror Images and barrier for P2. Now that I'm thinking of it, and did some higher Tyrannical keys on this key, I think it's actually beneficial for us to send Mirror Images in P1. Just a flat 20% 20% DR in P1 is going to be really beneficial. Because you should be getting out of this phase in basically under a minute, and Mirror Images last 40 or 45 seconds, something like that. So I would recommend sending Mirror Images in P1 here, because in P2 you'll need to be aware of the first Shadow Bolt Volley, because you won't have like the increased health or anything like that. And so when that does happen, the first one you obviously have all your other defensive. You have G and Viz, you have both your Ice Colds or Ice Blocks, whatever you're using. That's when I would use one of those bigger defensives. But in this P1, just a flat 20% DRF Mirror Image should be enough to keep you alive, as well as having a barrier up as much as you can. Now I did send Icy Veins here because it should be a continuous phase between now and P2. Obviously there's a little bit of downtime while this guy, you're still attacking him, but he doesn't really take any damage. But it's still beneficial for me to just be sending Icy Veins on cooldown here. Obviously Lust is going to be coming up here in P2 as well. And now I just wasted 2 Icicles there. I was already at 5 Icicles with my Glacial Spike. Obviously I'm still making mistakes, but obviously there are a lot of times where I'm overcapping on Icicles and, you know, using Flurries or Ice Lances, or still generating it with my other spells, Frostbolt or whatever. Glacial Spike, as soon as you hit 5 targets, basically no matter the target count, should always be sent on cooldown. Especially because Glacial Spike is our top damage and keys, and obviously it has the benefit of the tier set. But the only reason I'm not doing it here is because this boss at this point just doesn't do anything. At this point, I'm kind of just trying to generate Brain Freeze procs and Fingers of Frost, so that's why I was just spamming Frostbolt. And now I decided that I was going to, so now that this is happening, the Shadow Bolt Volley is coming in 4 seconds. This is where obviously you're using all your defensives, so I used Mass Barrier, and I used G-Invis. Obviously I still got hit by a decent amount, but obviously a lot better than it would have been. And then, if you can, I would stack in melee here for the Stinging Swarms. Not only if you get yours, but it baits the swarms closer to the center, which obviously when you're running around during the mechanic, it's a lot better to have these pools in the center of the room versus on the outsides. And now I have this Stinging Swarm now. Unfortunately, as a caster, a lot of the time you literally just like can't get cast off. So you saw me sitting there at 4 Icicles the entire time, just unable to get a cast off on the Stinging Swarm. I have yet to figure out the best way to go around that, but and now when the Shadow Bolt's Volley comes out, you should be using a defensive, so you should either be using like Alter Time or your Barrier or Mirror Images or something. Try and have some form of defensive rolling for whenever the Shadow Bolt Volleys happen. Obviously in P2 it's not as big of a deal because you have the increased health. Obviously Mass Barrier in P2 is a very massive shield. It obviously loses some value because you obviously are going to be using Mass Barrier most likely either in P1 to give everybody a shield to make sure they don't get one shot, or you're going to be using it after the first Shadow Bolt Volley in P2. I think this week, especially on Tyrannical, I think it actually might be better for you to use Mass Barrier in P1 just to give everybody an extra 200k health, basically. Otherwise, you're going to be... There's many keys this week that I think I've had 2 different Black Rook holds that I bricked just on the last boss alone, where some people are just getting one shot in P1, and there's nothing you can do about that, obviously. But... other than that, this is just a single target fight for the rest of it. So you're just doing the basic single target rotation. And in this case, I think the way I should play around this, so I'm at 2, I think it comes in the next one here. Yeah, so I'm already at 2 Flurry Charges, and I have a Brain Freeze. Because I still have Winter's Chill on the target, I'm just bear casting Glacial Spike in because it's going to shatter off Winter's Chill. I think in this case I should actually be Glacial Spiking into a Flurry because of the chance that Glacial Spike has to proc one. Otherwise, there's a chance that I'm proc munching a Flurry here. Other than that, Black Rook Cold is basically relatively a pretty free key. You see we have 24 deaths and still timed for Black Rook with, I think we had like 2 full wipes or 1 wipe. We had the 1 wipe where we ran all the way back down the stairs, and then we had the other wipe. Or I don't think we actually had a full wipe on this key, but obviously we had like 3 or 4 times where the tank died and the tank ran back and it was just kiting for the rest of the time. So obviously not a very clean key. I ended up at 295k overall, DH 372, and Rogue 293. So Obviously, we didn't have an Augmentation Evoker for this key. I think Augmentation Evokers are going to be a lot more important on Tyrannical keys versus the Fortified keys. But in my opinion, this is probably going to be one of the easier keys now at the time, the Black Rook Hold. It's basically as long as you don't get one shot by Hateful Gaze or the Earth Stomp. And then as long as you don't get one shot by this boss here, I think this key is probably going to be the easier one after the Atal'Dazar changes. But yeah, that's it for the commentary for this one. If you guys enjoyed the content, I stream at twitch.tv/thegumbies. It'll be down in the description. And then obviously I'll be uploading this will be on YouTube as well. So that'll be it for the commentary for the 26 Black Rook Hold of Fortified Volcanic Spiteful. And if you guys like the content, make sure you like and subscribe, because I'll be posting more commentaries for the rest of the tier, as well as doing commentaries for raid fights as well. But those might not be coming for a little bit until like re-clear time. But other than that, thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the video.